Hey guys, Jason Creel and you're watching The Lawn Care Life. Today I'm going to talk about one of the most prominent cool season weeds in my area, one that I deal with on a regular basis, and that's the weed known as Poa Annua, or what many of us just call Poa. It's also referred to as annual bluegrass. So in this video I want to show you the weed so that you can correctly identify it. We're going to talk a little bit about it. I'm going to show you how to prevent it both from a pre-emergent standpoint and how to get rid of it from a post-emergent standpoint. So if that sounds like it's going to be helpful to you, then stay tuned for this video. So let's talk about a few different strategies a lawn care company, or I guess a homeowner, could use to control Poa in their lawn. So you could do a couple things. You could say, okay, I'm going to use prodiamine in the fall. I might have a little Poa breakthrough, and I'm going to deal with that from a spot treating perspective with these products that I've shown you in the past. That's one option. Option number two, you may say, I'm going to use prodiamine on any yard that has not had a Poa problem in the past. On the ones that have had a Poa problem, I'm going to use Spectacle because it's a lot more expensive, but in my opinion, get better Poa control. And so you do that. You kind of use Spectacle on the problem yards, use prodiamine on the ones that haven't had that much of a problem. That's not a bad option. Another option, you may say, you know what, I don't want any problems. I'm going to use Spectacle. It's expensive, but I think it's going to make my yards the cleanest, not only from Poa, but hopefully for some other weeds as well next spring. So that's an option. You might use prodiamine in the fall, and then you might say, you know what I'm going to do, instead of using I'm going to use prodiamine, knowing that I might have a little Poa breakthrough. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back in January or February, I'm going to go ahead and spray all my yards with Revolver, or one of these other products, just in case there was some Poa breakthrough. I'm going to spray it and try to get rid of it from a post-emergent standpoint while it's very small and before it really starts showing up in people's lawns. So that's another option. You know, so there's a number of ways to handle this. Like I said, what I did this year, I used Spectacle on about half my properties. Been very impressed with it. I will strongly consider possibly going to using it on just about all my properties next year. And the other half I use prodiamine. And yes, I had a little bit of Poa breakthrough, and I'm dealing with that from a post-emergent standpoint. So you know, you decide that from your business what's the best way to approach it. If you're in the lawn business, if you are in the lawn business, if you don't mind sharing in the comment section your approach to Poa, both from a pre and post-emergent standpoint, I'd like to hear it, and it may benefit others. If you're a homeowner, hopefully this video has been helpful to educate you on what Poa is and some on the weed, Poa Annua, what it looks like. You can properly identify it, and now hopefully know some methods to use to control it in your lawn. If you hadn't done so, subscribe to the channel. Let me help you, and let's continue to learn more about lawns and lawn care from both the good side, and let's continue to learn more and more about lawns and lawn care. And you can check out these suggested videos. Thanks a lot. The time of this video is in early February. If you see on this lawn, it's a Bermuda lawn that is dormant. And then you look over here and you think, wow, what is all that little green stuff over there? So let's go take a look and see what this patch of green is in the dormant Bermuda. Well, that's exactly what this video is about. It's Poa Annua, or let's just refer to it as Poa, because this kind of doesn't exactly roll off the tongue to say Poa Annua. Let me see if I can get you a real close-up shot here. All right, so there's Poa. You might notice if you cut grass, you might notice this weed about April, early in the mowing season. It'll have a little seed head that's very difficult to mow. It's so flimsy, it won't hardly cut. So it can be very frustrating to mow this. All right, so annual bluegrass, or Poa, is a cool season weed. So what does that mean? In general, you've got cool season weeds and warm season weeds. So warm season weeds typically are going to germinate in the springtime. You're going to see them throughout the summer. They'll die off when it gets cooler weather. Cool season weeds typically are germinating in the fall, and you'll see them throughout the winter months and in the early spring, and most of them, at least in my area, can't take the heat, so when it gets hot they go away. So, you know, being February, we're dealing with a lot of cool season weeds right now, and Poa being one of the most common. So let's talk about preventing Poa from a pre-emergent standpoint. Now, like I said, cool season weed. So in my area, I'm in Alabama, a lot of these cool season weeds germinate when the fall weather comes in and the soil temperatures begin to drop. So typically, we're gonna think sometime around September, October, when you get that real cold, that first real cool taste of fall in the evening time, and those soil temperatures begin to drop, then that Poa is germinating. So what does that mean? You want to have your pre-emergent down before that happens. If your pre-emergent is down after the weed is already germinates, then it's not going to be much good. Here in my area, typically that's sometime during September. I want to have my pre-emergent out before that happens. Now let's talk about different kind of pre-emergents. Let me show you one type of pre-emergent, and I'm going to talk about another. Alright, so what I'm showing you right now is Resolute. It is a generic form of barricade, and you'll look under the active ingredients here and you see prodiamine 65%. So Resolute's going to come in different forms, or barricade. You can get it in a granular form. If you have a push spreader and you just want to put this out in your lawn, you can do that. And what I'm going to do to try to prevent Poa Annua is to get this Resolute out before it germinates. Like I said, in my area, that's sometime around in September, and that time can vary depending on the weather. So if I thought, you know what, I'm looking at the 15-day forecast, I see this day in September where there's a cold front coming in, the temperature is going to drop down in the low 40s. Chances are I want to have my pre-emergent out before that happens, because there's going to be some weeds germinating when that cool weather hits. Now, the problem is when you're running a business and you've got hundreds of customers, or some of you have thousands of customers, how do you get your pre-emergent out before that happens? You know, well, you think, well, can't you just start earlier? Well, sometimes if you put it out too early in the hot weather, let's just say out there, okay, I'll put it out in early August. Well, early August, it might be 100 degrees. So you might have some of your pre-emergent break down too early. So there's kind of a tight time frame window that you're trying to get, and the truth is you can't get to everybody before the weeds germinate. So we'll talk about that later. But ideally, if you were a homeowner, you know, you put it down before that cold front comes in and that cool weather moves in. Resolute does a pretty good job on Poa. It's also what I use early in the year to try to prevent warm season weeds like crabgrass and things like that. But this prodiamine is going to do a pretty good job. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. I heard somebody talking the other day, and he's talking about Poa as many times as began to show some resistance to some pre-emergence, you know, one of them being prodiamine. So if you have strands of Poa in an area that begin to show resistance, you may have to switch to a different kind of product. Now, what I did this past year is I used prodiamine on about half my customers. The other half I use another product, and I don't have it to show you right now, but it's called Spectacle. Spectacle is another pre-emergent that costs significantly more than prodiamine. In my opinion, and from the results I'm seeing now from using it this past fall, I'm seeing a lot better Poa control. Now you're saying, well, if I didn't have a big Poa problem, you know, maybe I don't need to justify the cost of Spectacle. But if you had a particular yard that had a lot of Poa, and I had a few, and I've used Spectacle Flow this year on some of those yards, and it virtually eliminated all the Poa. So Spectacle does a great job on Poa, but at a significantly higher cost. So you have to kind of weigh that, whether you're a homeowner or a business. You know, homeowner, probably hard to swing the price of Spectacle, but as a business, you sort of weigh that. Is that worth the expense that's going to bring on my business? For me, in many ways it was, because I thought, you know what, it's going to reduce the number of callbacks I get the fall and spring. I'm not going to have to deal with Poa from a post-emergent standpoint, or at least very little. And those things have held true for me in using spectacle this year. So, you know, but I know other people and they use prodiamine, and that's fine too. Now, what are some other options? Let's say you put out prodiamine and you took care of most of the POA, but you still have some. Maybe you had a particular yard that had really thin Bermuda grass and it was in real shady and kind of stay a little wet, and that's typically what you're going to see in the thicker turf. It's not going to you're not going to have as many weeds in general, but at a shady area with some thin grass, you might end up with some POA. So what are you going to do about that from a post-emergent standpoint? Well, there's a number of things, number of products out there that are going to be labeled for POA. I'm going to show you one or two today. So it looks like I'm going to show you 4 products that will all have some success from a post-emergent control of POA. So we talked about Revolver. Revolver is kind of expensive, but does a great job. If you had a yard that was totally covered in POA from a post-emergent standpoint, let's just say it was January or February in our area, and you saw, oh no, I've got a yard that's totally covered in POA. So what does that mean? That means you're either late with your pre-emergent, or it just broke through the pre-emergent, or maybe you had a new customer sign up and they didn't have any kind of pre-emergent in the fall. So for whatever reason you've got a lot of POA, then you may put Revolver in the tank and spray it and see if you can get it all knocked out. Because yes, the heat will kill POA, but it's going to be on up in the springtime before that happens. Another product is the Celsius. Celsius is a product we use, you know, a lot for spot treating. I don't think POA is actually even on the label, but I have heard that Celsius will have some effect on POA. Probably not as good as Revolver. And then this is Katana. It's another product you can use to kill, like for example, Revolver would have an effect. If you're trying to get rid of like ryegrass or something out of a dormant Bermuda zoysia lawn, you could use Revolver, and it also is going to work on POA. Well, Katana, in my experience, has been that it is more of the ryegrass products. If you had a cool season grass like ryegrass trying to get it out of a dormant Bermuda lawn, then Katana is probably going to work better on the grass, but will also work on the POA. Where Revolver is probably better on the POA, not quite as good on the grasses, if that makes sense. So if I had ryegrass, I'm going to go with Katana. If I had POA, probably going to use Revolver or something else. Tribute Total is another product that, you know, can be used to get rid of POA from a post-emergent standpoint, and a bunch of other weeds as well. You know, all these can be used for multiple weeds, but I'm just talking specifically about POA in this video. So wanted to take a minute to give you this weed control lesson. As we've talked about this before, as a general rule of thumb, it's better to try to prevent weeds from a pre-emergent standpoint than a post-emergent standpoint. Typically it's cheaper. Now that might not be the case if you're using spectacle like I talked about. It might actually be more expensive to prevent it that way, but I think sometimes the benefits outweigh the cost. But you know, for POA, like, it can be a little bit challenging weed to get rid of from a post-emergent standpoint. I mean, it can be slow to die from these post-emergent products that I'm showing you. So best case scenario is prevent it in the fall with your pre-emergent if possible, and then use these products if you have to get rid of it from a post-emergent standpoint. Something else important to mention, if you're using a fall pre-emergent trying to prevent POA, it's a good idea to add simazine into the mix. What the simazine does is give you an opportunity to try to control any POA that's already germinated but still in a very baby stage. Then you're hoping that simazine will be able to take that POA out. So add that in with whatever pre-emergent you're using, whether that be spectacle or prodiamine or something else.